It was a bright afternoon in New York City, the kind of day where the streets were bustling with life, and the sky was an endless shade of blue. Elon Musk walked down Fifth Avenue, surrounded by the noise of car engines, people talking, and the occasional sound of a street performer. His family, as usual, was by his side, his wife, Tallulah, and their son, Xavier, who was strapped into a sleek wheelchair. Xavier had been paralyzed since birth, a condition that no amount of money or technology had been able to cure. Elon was no stranger to challenges. He had conquered the tech world with Tesla, revolutionized space travel with SpaceX, and even pushed for a Hyperloop system that would change the way the world traveled. Yet, nothing had prepared him for this. It was just a moment, a fraction of time, but it felt like everything around him slowed down. As they walked toward a cafe, a small, scruffy figure appeared out of nowhere. A young boy, no older than 12, with dirty clothes and a face that had seen more hardship than most adults ever would. He wasn't the kind of person you'd expect to see on a street like this, but there he was, standing right in front of Elon, blocking his path. The boy's eyes locked with Elon's, and for a split second, everything else faded into the background. There was something about him, a quiet intensity, a certain knowing, that made Elon pause. "Excuse me, sir," the boy said, his voice raspy but clear. "I can make your son walk again." Elon froze. Xavier, who had been happily chatting with his mother, suddenly grew silent. Tallulah looked at the boy, a mix of confusion and discomfort written on her face. Elon, however, couldn't move. The words hung in the air like a strange, unexplainable force. The boy wasn't asking for money. He wasn't begging for a meal. No, his words were far more audacious. He had made a claim that seemed too impossible to believe. Elon blinked, trying to make sense of the situation. Was this a prank? A scam? Or was the boy simply delusional? It wasn't like him to be taken off guard by much, but this was something else entirely. In the back of his mind, Elon could already hear his logical brain trying to dismiss the idea. It's nonsense, he thought. Just another beggar looking for attention. Yet something about the boy's gaze made him hesitate. There was an unshakable certainty in those dark, tired eyes. "Excuse me." Elon finally managed to speak, his voice a little more guarded now. "What did you say?" The boy didn't flinch. He stepped closer, his eyes still locked onto Xavier, who was sitting quietly in his wheelchair. "I can make him walk again," the boy repeated, his voice unwavering. "You've tried everything, right? All the doctors, all the therapies. But none of them work. I can help. I can make him walk again." A moment of silence stretched out, thick with tension. Elon felt a strange shiver run down his spine, but he didn't want to show it. He had spent years working on the future of humanity, making electric cars, building rockets, exploring new frontiers of technology, but the one thing he couldn't fix was his son's condition. Despite all his money, all his resources, nothing had ever worked. Now this kid, this random stranger on the street, was claiming to have the answer. It was insane. Xavier, sensing the tension, looked up at his father, his face filled with curiosity. "Dad, who's that?" Elon's heart clenched as he looked at his son, the child he loved more than anything in the world, the child he wished he could help more than anything else. It was a painful reminder of his helplessness. No amount of genius, no amount of technology, could fix this. And yet, here was this boy, offering something that Elon thought was impossible. Tallulah was the first to speak. "Elon, don't engage with him," she said, her voice tinged with worry. "It's probably just a scam. We don't need to be dealing with this." But Elon couldn't let it go. He looked down at the boy again, studying him carefully. The boy didn't seem like someone who would waste his time with nonsense. There was something strange about him, a depth in his eyes that seemed far beyond his age. "What do you mean, exactly?" Elon asked, his tone shifting slightly. "How could you possibly do something like that?" The boy's expression softened, and for the first time, a small, almost sad smile crossed his face. I've seen it before. I've helped others. Not here, not in the city, but in places where people would never believe. He paused, then added, I can help him walk. If you'll just give me a chance. Elon's mind raced, spinning in a whirl of disbelief and curiosity. He could hear Tallulah's voice in the back of his head, urging him to walk away, to not get involved in something that sounded like a wild fantasy. But at the same time, he couldn't shake the feeling that this moment, this strange, impossible encounter, was something more. Do you want us to go with you somewhere? Elon asked, his voice quieter now. Where do you want to take us? The boy shook his head. It's not about where we go, he said softly. It's about what you're willing to believe. Elon's heart was racing now, and for the first time in years, he felt a sense of uncertainty, a feeling that maybe, just maybe, there was more to this world than even he could understand. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from, the boy added, his voice still calm but with an underlying urgency. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Elon took a deep breath, glancing at his son, then his wife. His mind was conflicted. Was this a chance for hope, or was it just another scam? He didn't know yet, but something inside him was telling him to find out. With a final glance at the boy, Elon nodded. All right, he said, show me. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Elon Musk had never been one to believe in miracles. His life had been built on logic, science, and a relentless pursuit of progress. He didn't deal in magic or superstition, but facts. Whether it was launching rockets into space or developing electric vehicles, everything in his world had a method, a process. But as he walked alongside the strange beggar boy, something deep inside him stirred, something he hadn't felt in years. Was this the beginning of a new chapter? Or was he simply chasing after a delusion? Elon glanced at the boy, who was walking confidently beside them. Despite his ragged clothes and the dirt smeared across his face, there was something undeniably calm about him. It wasn't the demeanor of a typical street urchin. There was an air of quiet intelligence in his eyes, as if he knew something the world didn't. As if he had answers to questions Elon had never even dared to ask. The boy's name, as it turned out, was Alexander, though he rarely used it. To most people, he was simply the beggar. But in reality, Alexander wasn't just any ordinary child. His story began not in the streets of New York, but in the cold, sterile laboratories of research institutions across the globe. Years ago, Alexander had been a prodigy. His intelligence surpassed that of most adults, even at a young age. He had an uncanny understanding of science, technology, and medicine, abilities that made him a sought-after mind in the world of cutting-edge research. But as often happens with those who stand out, Alexander became a target. Powerful corporations and government entities recognized his potential but saw him as a threat to their monopoly on knowledge and innovation. At the age of 10, Alexander had been approached by a secretive group. They promised him wealth, power, and fame in exchange for his brilliance, but they had an ulterior motive. They intended to exploit his knowledge for their own gain. When Alexander refused to comply, they turned on him, using their influence to erase him from every record, rendering him invisible to the world. Elon, who had been listening intently to the boy's story, felt a chill run down his spine. He had heard of stories like this before, of brilliant minds being crushed by those who sought to control knowledge and power. But this was different. There was a conviction in Alexander's voice that made Elon pause. Why didn't you come forward earlier? Elon asked, his voice steady but filled with curiosity. If you could help people, if you could make someone walk again, why hide? Alexander smiled faintly, his eyes far away, as if remembering something painful. I tried. I wanted to help, but the world isn't ready for what I can do. They would just try to use it for their own purposes. The world isn't ready for a cure they can't control, or for a future they didn't create. Elon felt a pang of empathy. He understood that drive. He had always believed in the power of human progress, the need for innovation to push the world forward. But unlike Alexander, he had always done it under the public eye, making moves that would change the world and sharing it with everyone. I get it, Elon said, his voice softer now. You want to make a difference, but you can't let the wrong people control it. Alexander nodded, his expression turning serious. Exactly. And that's why I'm here now. I know your son's condition, Xavier. I know what he's going through. And I can help him. Elon stopped walking. The air around him felt heavy, charged with a strange energy. He had been working tirelessly for years to find a way to help Xavier, to find the cure for his son's paralysis. But no matter what he tried, cutting-edge surgeries, experimental therapies, even the best doctors in the world, nothing had worked. What do you mean you can help him? Elon asked, his voice barely above a whisper. He knew his son's condition all too well, it was permanent. No one, not even the greatest minds in medicine, had been able to fix it. I'm not talking about some band-aid solution, Alexander replied, his voice unwavering. This is a real cure. Something the world has been keeping from you. I can regenerate nerve tissue, repair the spinal cord. The technology exists, Elon. I've seen it. And I can make it work. Elon blinked in disbelief. Was this possible? Could a boy, a beggar, really possess the knowledge to do what no one else could? The very thought of it seemed absurd. But the conviction in Alexander's voice made him hesitate. Who are you really? Elon asked, his skepticism rising. What's your real story? Alexander smiled, a mysterious look crossing his face. I told you. My name is Alexander. And I'm not a beggar. I was a scientist, a doctor, a researcher. I know more than most people will ever understand. But that's not important right now. What matters is that I can help your son. If you'll let me. Elon's mind was spinning. It seemed impossible, but he had to admit, there was something about the boy that made him believe, just for a moment, that maybe, just maybe, there was a way to heal Xavier. For years, Elon had poured every ounce of his wealth and knowledge into solving this one problem. His son's paralysis had been the one thing that technology couldn't fix. But here, in front of him, stood a boy who claimed to have the answer. All right, Elon said, his voice steady but filled with a mix of hope and doubt. I'll give you a chance. But you'll have to prove it to me. Alexander nodded, his eyes gleaming with a quiet determination. I will. But it's not going to be easy. You'll have to trust me, and trust isn't something I expect you to give easily. Elon took a deep breath, glancing at his wife and son, both of whom were looking at him expectantly. The weight of the decision hung heavy in the air. Was he about to gamble his son's future on a boy with a seemingly impossible claim? Lead the way, Elon said. Let's see what you can do. And just like that, the course of their lives was set into motion. As Elon, Tallulah, and Xavier followed the mysterious boy through the crowded streets of New York, a sense of unease began to settle in the pit of Elon's stomach. He had always been cautious, always analyzed the situation before making any decision, especially when it came to his son. But this felt different. It felt like he was stepping into something unknown, something beyond his control. The city's hustle and bustle seemed distant now. The noise of the traffic, the chatter of pedestrians, the rustling of newspapers, they all faded into the background as they followed Alexander. He was moving with purpose, as though he had a clear destination in mind. Elon's eyes kept darting to his son, who was sitting quietly in his wheelchair, his small hands resting on the armrests. Xavier had always been an inquisitive child, and the fact that he was now silent, staring at the boy in front of him, only added to the tension that had begun to mount. Tallulah, walking beside Elon, was just as quiet, her face a mixture of concern and curiosity. She hadn't said much since the encounter with Alexander, but Elon could feel her skepticism. He could sense her doubts, just as he had his own. "What's going on, Elon?" Tallulah finally broke the silence. This is crazy. I mean, this kid is claiming to cure Xavier. How do we even know he's telling the truth? What if he's just playing with us?" Elon didn't answer immediately. He didn't have the answers. He wanted to believe, more than anything, that this could be real, that this boy could help their son walk again. But he was a scientist, and scientists didn't operate on blind faith. They operated on evidence, on data, on results. "I don't know," Elon said after a pause, his voice uncertain. "But there's something about him, Tallulah. I can't explain it. It's like he knows something that we don't. And we've tried everything else, right? What's the harm in hearing him out?" Tallulah didn't respond right away, her lips pressed together in a tight line. She had always been the more grounded one between the two of them, the one who kept Elon's impulsive nature in check. But she could see the hope in his eyes, a hope that hadn't been there in years. Xavier's condition had been a constant weight on their family, a reminder of what they couldn't change, no matter how hard they tried. "I just don't want you to get your hopes up, Elon," she said quietly. "I've seen you do that before, only to be disappointed." "I know," he replied, his voice tinged with the pain of past failures. "But what if this is different?" They walked in silence for a few more blocks, passing through a quieter part of the city, the streets lined with brownstones and small cafes. The energy of the city seemed to shift here, the noise dimming, replaced by a strange stillness that felt out of place in such a busy metropolis. Alexander didn't stop. He walked with purpose, his eyes fixed ahead, never looking back to see if they were still following. The boy's pace didn't falter, as if he knew exactly where he was going, like he had been here before. Finally, they arrived at an old building tucked away between two skyscrapers. It wasn't much to look at, just a small, nondescript door with a faded sign that read, "Medical Research Facility." There was nothing impressive about it, nothing that screamed, state-of-the-art technology. "This is it?" Elon asked, raising an eyebrow. The building looked abandoned, its exterior cracked and weathered, as if no one had cared for it in years. Alexander nodded. "This is where it all started. You're going to need to trust me." Elon looked at Tallulah, who was still uncertain. She seemed to be grappling with the same emotions he was, hope mingled with caution. He could see the doubt in her eyes, but there was also a flicker of curiosity. She had always wanted to believe in the impossible, in the things that couldn't be explained. Perhaps this was one of those moments. "Let's go inside," Elon said, finally making the decision. He wasn't sure where this journey would lead, but he couldn't turn back now. He had to see it through, if only for Xavier's sake. The door creaked as Alexander pushed it open, revealing a dimly lit hallway. The air inside smelled stale, like old papers and forgotten experiments. As they entered, the sound of their footsteps echoed in the empty space, amplifying the eerie quiet. "Welcome to my lab," Alexander said, his voice low but filled with a strange pride. "This is where the real work happens." They followed him down the hallway, passing doors that led to dark rooms, each one seemingly empty, with only the hum of old equipment in the background. Elon couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, like they were trespassing in a place that didn't belong to them. Finally, they reached a room at the end of the hall. It was small, cluttered with papers, old computers, and strange machines that Elon couldn't identify. The walls were lined with shelves of books, scientific journals, and vials filled with liquids of various colors. "Sit down," Alexander said, gesturing to a chair in the center of the room. "This is where I'll show you what I can do." Elon hesitated. There was no turning back now. He looked at Xavier, who was watching the boy intently, and then at Tallulah. They were in this together, for better or worse. "All right," Elon said, his voice steady, though his heart was racing. Show us what you can do. Alexander gave him a small, knowing smile before turning to the table where various instruments lay. His hands moved with precision as he began setting things up. There was an energy in the room now, an electric current that seemed to hum through the air. As he worked, Elon couldn't help but wonder, was this really the answer they'd been searching for all these years? Or was it all just smoke and mirrors? I'm going to need Xavier to lie down on the table, Alexander said, his voice cutting through Elon's thoughts. Xavier looked up at his father with uncertainty in his eyes. Dad, is this safe? Elon took a deep breath. He didn't have an answer to that. But in this moment, he realized that hope was all they had left. Just trust him, son, Elon said softly, his voice filled with both love and fear. Xavier nodded hesitantly and wheeled himself over to the table, his face set with determination. The moment had arrived. Now, the real test would begin. The room felt even more stifling now that Xavier had settled onto the table. There was a palpable tension in the air, a strange mix of anticipation and fear that hovered like a heavy fog. Elon stood by Xavier's side, his eyes fixed on the boy, waiting for something, anything, to happen. Tallulah, standing near the door, crossed her arms tightly across her chest, watching with a wariness that matched Elon's own. Alexander, on the other hand, moved with a calm, almost eerie precision. He had already begun to hook up wires and place electrodes on Xavier's legs, his fingers working effortlessly, as if he'd done this 1,000 times before. The room was silent except for the occasional soft hum of the machines. Is this really necessary? Elon finally asked, his voice tight with nerves. He couldn't help but feel that this was all happening too fast, too unreal. Alexander looked up briefly, his face still focused, but his eyes met Elon's with a quiet intensity. The process is simple. You just need to let me work. Despite his words, Elon couldn't shake the feeling that something larger than just a medical procedure was unfolding here. There was no going back now. This was more than just a treatment, it felt like a leap of faith into something unknown, a dive into a world where the line between science and possibility blurred beyond recognition. Tallulah took a few steps forward, her eyes wide. You really think this is going to work? She asked, her voice softer now, but the disbelief still tinged in her words. Alexander paused, a faint, almost imperceptible smile tugging at the corners of his lips. I don't think it. I know it. Xavier's gaze met his father's as he lay still on the table. There was a vulnerability in his eyes, a mix of hope and fear that tugged at Elon's heart. This was his son, the person he had fought to protect for so long, the boy he had spent sleepless nights researching, funding, and even praying for. All of that had led them to this moment. Ready, Xavier? Elon asked, crouching beside his son and holding his hand. Xavier gave a small nod. I guess so, Dad. The boy had never asked for sympathy or pity, his resilience had always been one of the things Elon admired most about him. But there was a sadness that clung to him, a sorrow that no amount of money or resources could alleviate. Elon squeezed his son's hand tightly, then turned back to Alexander, who had now activated a strange machine that hummed with an eerie glow. The air in the room seemed to thicken as a blue light flickered across the wires attached to Xavier's legs. What's happening? Tallulah asked, her voice tight with both curiosity and fear. It's starting, Alexander said, his eyes trained on the machine. This technology isn't from this time. It's from a future you can't yet imagine. The nerve regeneration process begins with stimulating the spinal cord and encouraging the body's own healing mechanisms to kickstart. Elon's mind raced. This was unlike anything he'd ever heard of, but Alexander's confidence was unshakable. His scientific curiosity flared. How could such a thing even be possible? Elon had seen almost every breakthrough imaginable, he had pioneered some of them himself, but this? This was something beyond comprehension. For a moment, the room fell completely silent, except for the steady pulse of the machine. Then, slowly, as the minutes passed, a strange tingling sensation seemed to fill the air. Elon could see Xavier's legs twitch ever so slightly at first, as if they were waking up from a long slumber. Xavier's breathing quickened as he watched his legs, disbelief and hope warring in his expression. "Dad! I felt something." Elon's heart skipped a beat. Could it be? Could this really be happening? "It's just the first stage," Alexander said, never looking away from the machine. "This is where the real healing begins. The body has to adjust before it can truly heal itself. But it will take time. Patience." Elon nodded, trying to calm his racing thoughts. It was too soon to celebrate, but there was a flicker of hope that ignited in his chest. He had seen his son struggle for so long, seen the exhaustion and frustration in his eyes as he faced the world from a wheelchair. Could this boy, this mysterious Alexander, be the one to change that forever? Minutes turned to hours as the machine continued to hum, its glow intensifying. The tension in the room grew thicker, like a waiting storm. Elon's body felt stiff from standing so long, but he didn't dare leave his son's side. Not now. Not when something real, something tangible, seemed to be happening. Xavier's legs twitched again, this time more noticeably. His feet moved ever so slightly, the toes curling and uncurling. Then, another movement, a little more defined. His eyes widened, and he gasped. "Dad! I think I can move my foot." Elon leaned in, his breath catching in his throat. "What? What do you mean?" Xavier's voice trembled as he tried to lift his foot. "I can feel it. I can move it. It's not much, but..." Elon grabbed his son's arm, his heart racing. He looked at Alexander, his eyes wide with disbelief. "This is really happening?" Alexander nodded, his expression unchanged. "It's just the beginning. The regeneration process is slow, but the neural pathways are reconnecting. The body is remembering how to move." A lump formed in Elon's throat as he watched his son, disbelief and awe mixing in his chest. He had witnessed many technological feats in his life, from the launch of rockets to the development of AI, but this was something beyond anything he could have imagined. But as much as he wanted to believe, a nagging doubt still lingered in his mind. Was this truly a miracle? Or was it too good to be true? Could a boy who had been discarded by the world really possess the knowledge to heal his son? Before Elon could voice his concerns, the machine let out a soft beep, and the blue light flickered one last time. "That's enough for today," Alexander said, calmly shutting off the device. "We don't want to overwhelm the system. Xavier's body needs to adjust. But this is the first step." Elon stood still, trying to process what had just happened. His mind was reeling with 1,000 thoughts, but one stood out above the rest: hope. He looked down at his son, whose eyes were shining with something he hadn't seen in years: hope. "Thank you," Elon whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Alexander only nodded. "This is just the beginning, Mr. Musk. The journey has only just started." And with that, the first spark of hope had ignited. The room was quiet now, save for the soft hum of the machine that had just powered down. Xavier's legs were still twitching occasionally, almost as if they were remembering their purpose, remembering how to move. Elon's heart was still racing, his mind struggling to grasp the reality of what had just transpired. "Dad?" Xavier's voice was small, almost uncertain, as he slowly attempted to move his legs. Am I really walking again?" Elon's breath caught in his throat. He had dreamed of this moment, he had spent countless nights envisioning a future where his son could run, play, and move freely like other children. But this was different. This wasn't a dream. It was happening right in front of him, and the weight of it was almost too much to bear. "I don't know, son," Elon said, his voice thick with emotion. He swallowed hard, trying to steady himself. "But we'll get there. We'll do this together." Tallulah, who had been standing by the door, finally moved forward, her face a mixture of disbelief and awe. She knelt down beside Xavier, gently taking his hand. "Xavier," she said softly, her voice trembling. This is real, isn't it?" Xavier nodded, tears welling up in his eyes. "I can feel it, Mom. I can feel my legs. I can move them." Elon felt his own eyes prick with tears. He had never been one to openly show his emotions, but this was too much. After years of struggle, of watching his son face a future so uncertain, it felt like the world was shifting under their feet, like the impossible was becoming possible. But as much as the moment was filled with joy, Elon couldn't shake the questions that still lingered in his mind. How was this possible? What had Alexander done? And why had he chosen them? Was this really the breakthrough they had been waiting for, or was there more to this story than they realized? As if sensing Elon's thoughts, Alexander spoke up. "You're seeing the effects now," he said, his voice calm, almost detached. "But there's much more to this than just a few moments of movement. This is just the beginning, and it will take time for Xavier's body to fully heal. The process is complex. But if you trust me, it will work." Elon's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean by trust you? What exactly are you doing to him?" Alexander turned, meeting Elon's gaze with an intensity that made him pause. "I'm giving him something that most people will never experience in their lifetime, an opportunity to heal, to recover, to be whole again. But it's not just about fixing the body. It's about unlocking potential that's been lying dormant. And if you want him to walk again, truly walk, you'll need to trust the process." Elon felt a knot tighten in his stomach. Something about Alexander's words didn't sit right with him. He had always prided himself on being a man of reason, of logic, of science. But what Alexander was claiming felt beyond reason. "You can't just ask us to trust you without understanding what this is," Elon said, his voice firmer now, tinged with a hint of suspicion. "This isn't some science experiment. This is our son. Our family. What's really going on here?" For the first time, Alexander seemed to hesitate, his eyes flickering with something Elon couldn't quite place. It was almost as if the boy was trying to decide how much to reveal. Finally, he spoke. "I understand your concerns," Alexander said slowly, "but what I'm doing is not just science. It's something else, something that transcends what you know as science. It's a gift, a power that exists beyond your understanding. And I didn't choose you randomly, Elon. I chose you because of what you've built, because of what you stand for. You've always looked to the future, to the unknown. You've sought to push the boundaries of what's possible." Elon's mind raced, trying to comprehend what Alexander was saying. A gift? A power? He shook his head in disbelief. "I don't understand. You're telling me this isn't science? This isn't something that can be explained?" "No," Alexander replied quietly. "It can't be explained. Not in the way you're used to." The weight of his words hung in the air, thick with meaning that Elon couldn't yet fully grasp. The room felt suffocating, as if the walls were closing in around him. He had come here for answers, for hope, but now it felt like they were standing on the edge of something far more complex, and dangerous, than he could have imagined. Xavier, who had been watching the exchange, now spoke up. His voice was filled with a quiet but undeniable determination. "I don't care how it works. I just want to walk again, Mom. Dad. I don't care if it's science or magic or whatever. I want my life back." Tears welled up in Tallulah's eyes as she took her son's hand. "I know, baby. I know. We all do." She turned to Elon, her voice gentle but filled with an urgency that made his heart ache. "Elon, he's asking for a chance. Don't we owe him that?" Elon looked at his son, his eyes full of emotion. The boy he had watched struggle, the child whose every step had been a fight against a world that seemed designed to leave him behind. He had spent so many sleepless nights searching for answers, for a way to make Xavier's life better. And now, standing here in this dimly lit room with a boy who seemed to hold the key to a miracle, Elon didn't know what to think. But one thing was clear, they couldn't turn back. They had to see this through. For Xavier. For their family. For the future. "All right," Elon said finally, his voice hoarse. "We'll trust you. But I need to know everything. I need to understand how this works." Alexander nodded, his face serious. "In time, you'll know. But for now, we focus on Xavier. The healing process is delicate, and it will require patience. There's no shortcut, no easy way. But if you commit, I promise you, he will walk again." The words felt heavy, filled with the weight of a promise that no one, least of all Elon, could fully understand. But for the first time in years, a small flicker of hope burned brighter than it ever had before. And in that moment, Elon made a decision. He would see this through. He would walk this uncertain path, even if it led them to places he couldn't predict. Because for Xavier, for his son, there was no other choice. The journey had only just begun. The days following Xavier's first moments of movement were a blur of emotions, uncertainty, and hope. The small progress that Xavier had made, those initial twitches and slight movements, were enough to fuel the belief that something extraordinary was happening, something beyond explanation. Elon couldn't stop replaying the events in his mind, questioning everything he thought he knew about science, technology, and even life itself. But there was no denying the change in Xavier. Even as the days passed, Xavier's confidence grew. Each time he tried to move his legs, the response was slightly stronger, more defined. The tingling sensation that had started on the first day of treatment was now replaced with the faintest sense of control, a feeling that hadn't been present for years. In the quiet of the nights, when Elon would sit beside his son's bed, his thoughts would wander. Was this really happening? Was he witnessing a miracle? Or was it simply the result of something more, something unknown that they hadn't fully understood yet? Elon had always prided himself on being a man of logic, of reason. But this was a different kind of reality. He couldn't deny the fact that Xavier was changing. But with that change came a nagging fear that he couldn't shake. If this was a breakthrough, if this was truly the future of medicine and technology, then what were the consequences? What were the costs? And so, Elon found himself increasingly drawn to Alexander, trying to understand the true nature of what was happening, what he was involved in. But each conversation with the mysterious boy only deepened the enigma. Alexander's cryptic words about the healing process, about things beyond science, were unsettling. There was something unexplainable at play here, and Elon wasn't sure if that was something to fear or embrace. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day of therapy, Xavier came to his father in the study. He had been practicing walking with help from Tallulah, each step an arduous yet exciting process. As Elon looked up from his work, he saw the tired but determined look on his son's face. "Dad," Xavier began, his voice steady but soft. "I need to ask you something." Elon set down his tablet, pushing his thoughts aside for a moment. "What's on your mind, son?" Xavier hesitated, as though trying to choose the right words. "I don't care about how it works, about what Alexander's doing. But, do you think this is real? Do you think I'm really going to walk again?" Elon's heart tightened as he looked at his son. There was a vulnerability in Xavier's eyes that spoke volumes. He could see the fear beneath the excitement, the fear of hoping for something that might not come true. It was the same fear that had been plaguing Elon ever since that first moment of movement. "I want to believe it, Xavier," Elon said quietly, his voice heavy with emotion. "I want to believe that everything is going to be okay. But we're in uncharted waters right now. We have to take it one step at a time." Xavier nodded, looking down at his legs, which were still difficult to move, but the progress was undeniable. He had gone from barely feeling his limbs to now being able to make small, tentative movements. I'll keep trying, Dad. I know it's not going to be easy, but I want this. I want to live again. The sincerity in his son's voice hit Elon harder than anything else had so far. He had spent so much time focusing on the technology, on the scientific breakthrough that had allowed them to be here, that he had forgotten to focus on the person who mattered the most, Xavier. Son, you've always been strong. And whatever happens, you're going to make it. We're going to make it. Together. As Xavier smiled at his father, Elon realized that this wasn't just about walking again. It wasn't about curing paralysis, about fixing the body. It was about something much deeper, about giving Xavier the chance to feel whole again, to have the life he deserved, to reclaim his place in the world. This journey wasn't just for Xavier's body, it was for his soul. The next few weeks were filled with moments of progress, but also moments of uncertainty. Alexander's treatments continued, each one pushing Xavier closer to his goal. The boy's legs were now moving more fluidly, his strength returning bit by bit. But there were setbacks too, times when Xavier would collapse from exhaustion or frustration. Times when the fear of failure would creep in, reminding them that nothing in this world, or the next, was ever guaranteed. Still, there was something undeniable about the way Xavier was changing. And for the first time in years, Elon felt a deep, overwhelming sense of gratitude. No matter what the outcome would be, they had been given a chance. A chance that not many people ever got. One evening, as the sun began to set, the Musk family sat together in the living room. Xavier was sitting on the couch, his legs stretched out in front of him. Elon sat beside him, his arm resting on the back of the couch. Tallulah was nearby, reading a book, but occasionally looking up to watch her son. Dad, I think I'm ready, Xavier said quietly, his voice determined. I think I'm ready to try walking again. Without help. Elon looked at his son, seeing the fire in his eyes, the same fire that had kept him going for all these years. You sure? Xavier nodded. I'm sure. With that, Elon helped his son stand. Xavier wobbled at first, but then, slowly, steadily, he took one small step. And then another. Each step was a victory, each movement a testament to his strength and determination. Elon held his breath, watching with a mixture of pride and awe. And then, just like that, Xavier took a few more steps. This time without help. Tears welled up in Elon's eyes as he stood there, watching his son walk for the first time in years. He had never imagined this moment, never believed it could truly happen. But now, standing here, with Xavier walking before him, he knew one thing for sure. This was a miracle. A miracle that couldn't be explained by logic, science, or reason. A miracle that went beyond anything Elon Musk could have ever dreamed. Dad. I did it, Xavier whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Elon nodded, his own voice caught in his throat. You did, son. You did. In that moment, everything changed. The journey that had begun with a boy who had lost all hope had led them here, a place where miracles weren't just possible, but real. And for the first time in a long while, Elon allowed himself to believe in something greater than science, greater than technology. He allowed himself to believe in the impossible. The weeks that followed Xavier's miraculous recovery were a whirlwind of triumphs, doubts, and quiet reflection. Every day seemed to bring new surprises, his son's increasing strength, his ability to walk longer distances without assistance, his growing independence. Yet for Elon, every success was accompanied by a nagging sense of unease, a whispering question he couldn't quite silence. What was Alexander doing to Xavier? How was he able to accomplish something that defied every known law of medicine? Elon spent hours in his private lab, poring over medical journals, studying the human nervous system, and researching every possible scientific method that could explain what had happened to Xavier. He reached out to colleagues in the medical field, hoping for a breakthrough, a piece of information that could demystify the process. But no one had any answers. No one had seen anything like this before. Even the most advanced theories in neuroscience seemed to fall short in explaining Xavier's condition. It was as if they were trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. Everything about what Alexander was doing defied logic and reason. And yet, it was working. The discomfort Elon felt grew as the days wore on. It wasn't just the uncertainty about the science that troubled him, it was the growing sense of dependence on Alexander. The boy was enigmatic, distant, and often elusive. He would show up, perform his treatments, and leave without so much as a word. His motivations, his methods, everything about him remained shrouded in mystery. One evening, after a particularly intense session with Xavier, Elon found himself once again in the study, lost in thought. Tallulah joined him, sensing his agitation. "Elon," she said softly, sitting down beside him. "You've been working non-stop. You've barely slept, you haven't eaten properly. I know you're trying to make sense of all of this, but you need to take a step back. You can't keep doing this to yourself." "I'm trying to protect Xavier, Tallulah," Elon said, his voice strained. "What Alexander is doing. I don't understand it. It doesn't make sense." "I know you're worried," Tallulah said gently. "But look at Xavier. Look at how far he's come. You wanted him to walk again, and now he is. We should be celebrating this. Not doubting it." Elon rubbed his temples, the weight of his thoughts pressing down on him. "It's not that simple. I'm happy for Xavier, but there's something wrong about all of this. We've seen progress, but at what cost? What's the long-term effect? I can't shake the feeling that we're on the edge of something dangerous." Tallulah sighed, leaning back in her chair. "Elon, I know you're scared. But sometimes, we have to trust the process. We've been given something extraordinary. We can't let fear stop us from believing in it." Elon stared at the wall for a long moment, deep in thought. Tallulah was right, in a way. They had been given a chance, one that most people would only dream of. But still, he couldn't let go of the nagging feeling that they were playing with fire. The next morning, Elon decided he had to confront Alexander. He couldn't continue down this path without understanding more about the boy, about the treatment, and about what lay ahead. If they were truly on the cusp of a breakthrough, then he needed to know what he was really dealing with. That afternoon, Alexander arrived as usual, his demeanor calm and collected, his eyes sharp and focused. Elon had scheduled a private meeting with him in the study, away from Xavier and Tallulah. "Alexander," Elon began, his tone measured, "I need to talk to you." The boy nodded, his expression unreadable. "What about?" "I need to understand what's happening to Xavier," Elon said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I need to know what you're doing to him. What's this process? What's the long-term effect? You've promised me that he'll walk again, but I need more than just your word. I need answers." Alexander's gaze softened slightly, but he didn't look surprised by Elon's demand. "I know you're concerned. And I understand why. What I'm doing is beyond anything you've ever encountered. It's not something that fits within the confines of traditional science. But I assure you, it's safe. Xavier is safe." "That's not good enough," Elon said, his voice rising in frustration. "You're asking us to put our trust in you without knowing what this is. And I need to understand. I need to know what's really going on." Alexander's eyes seemed to narrow for a brief moment, as if contemplating how much to reveal. "You've always been someone who seeks answers, Elon. But sometimes, the answers are hidden in places you don't want to look. What I'm offering isn't just a cure, it's a transformation. It's not about fixing a broken body. It's about unlocking potential that's been dormant. Xavier's condition was never just physical. It was mental, it was spiritual. And I'm helping him reconnect with something deeper within himself." Elon felt his skepticism deepen. "A transformation? You're talking about something beyond just physical healing. What does that even mean?" Alexander's expression grew more intense. It means that Xavier's body isn't the only thing being healed. What I'm doing is giving him the ability to tap into parts of himself that most people never even realize they have. This isn't just about walking. It's about unlocking his true potential. Elon shook his head. You're telling me you've been working on something that goes beyond science, beyond medicine, and you expect me to believe it's all for Xavier's benefit? This sounds like something out of a science fiction novel. It may sound impossible, Alexander replied calmly, but that's because you're trying to understand it in terms of your own limited perspective. The truth is, Xavier is on a journey that goes beyond anything you've imagined. And that's why I chose him. Because he's the one who can take it further. The question isn't whether this will work. The question is whether you'll be able to accept it when it does. Elon felt a cold chill run down his spine. He had no idea what Alexander was implying, but one thing was clear, this wasn't just about Xavier's recovery. It was about something far bigger, something that could change everything they thought they knew about human potential. But the more Alexander spoke, the more Elon realized one terrifying truth. They had already crossed a line. There was no turning back now. As Alexander left, Elon stood there, his mind spinning with more questions than answers. There was no more denying it, Xavier's recovery was a miracle. But what else was at play here? What had they unleashed? As the days passed, Elon's fear grew. Whatever Alexander was doing to Xavier, whatever forces he had tapped into, had only just begun. And if this journey was going to continue, they would need to be prepared for whatever came next. Because one thing was certain, they were no longer in control. Elon could feel the weight of Alexander's words hanging in the air like a thick fog. The boy had promised healing, but it was more than that. What had begun as a simple, if extraordinary, cure for Xavier's paralysis had quickly evolved into something far more complex, more unsettling. It was as though they had opened a door to a room they were not yet ready to enter, and now that door was swinging wide open, drawing them deeper into an unknown realm. Xavier's condition continued to improve at an unprecedented rate. Each day he made new strides, literally. He was walking now, without assistance. He could stand for long periods of time, his legs growing stronger by the day. But despite his physical recovery, Elon noticed something else, something intangible. His son's eyes had changed. The spark of life in them was brighter, sharper, but there was something else there too, something that Elon couldn't quite place. At first, it was subtle. Xavier was reading more, asking questions that were far beyond his years. He seemed to be developing a curiosity about the world that hadn't been there before, a thirst for knowledge and wisdom that seemed almost insatiable. It was as though he was waking up to a new version of himself, one that wasn't just about walking again, but about understanding the universe in a way that transcended ordinary perception. One night, Elon found Xavier in the study, a place he had often retreated to after his sessions with Alexander. The boy was sitting at a desk, surrounded by open books, sketching something on a piece of paper. "Xavier?" Elon called softly, stepping into the room. Xavier didn't look up immediately, but when he did, Elon was struck by the intensity in his eyes. The boy had always been bright, but now there was a kind of laser-like focus that unnerved him. "Dad," Xavier said, his voice calm and steady. "I think I understand it now. What Alexander's been doing." Elon's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" Xavier pushed the paper towards his father. It was a detailed diagram of the human nervous system, more detailed than any Elon had ever seen. Every nerve, every synapse, every connection had been mapped out with uncanny precision. And then, in the center of the page, there was a glowing symbol, one that Elon didn't recognize. It was a shape, but not a conventional one. A geometric pattern with intricate lines that seemed to pulse with an energy all their own. "Do you see it?" Xavier asked, his finger tracing the symbol. "This is what Alexander's been teaching me. The pattern that connects everything, the flow of energy that runs through us, through all living things. He's been unlocking it in me. And now, I can see it too. Elon felt a chill run down his spine. He stared at the diagram, his mind racing. This was beyond anything he had ever studied, beyond anything he had ever conceived. It wasn't just the human nervous system. It was something else. Something fundamental. Xavier, Elon said, his voice tight. Where did you learn this? Xavier looked up at him, his expression oddly serene. I don't know, Dad. It just came to me. I've been seeing things differently. It's like I can see the connections between everything, the way the universe is all tied together. Elon swallowed hard, trying to process what his son was saying. This wasn't just about healing. Xavier wasn't just walking again, he was experiencing something on a level that defied explanation. And that symbol, it wasn't just a random pattern. It felt like a key to something that could change everything. What does this mean, Xavier? Elon asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Xavier leaned back in his chair, his gaze distant. I think it means that Alexander has unlocked something in me, something in all of us. We're all connected by this energy, this force. And now that I can see it, I can tap into it. It's like I'm seeing the world with new eyes. Elon stood there, trying to make sense of it. He had always known that there was more to the universe than they could comprehend. But this? This was something else entirely. It wasn't just a breakthrough in medicine or technology. It was a shift in perception, in reality itself. He needed answers. He needed to understand what Alexander had done to Xavier, and why it had worked. And most of all, he needed to know what this would mean for the future, for Xavier, for his family, and for humanity as a whole. That night, Elon made up his mind. He was going to confront Alexander again, face to face. He couldn't keep skating around the truth. He needed to know what the boy had unleashed, and how far this transformation would go. The next day, Elon arranged to meet with Alexander in a private, undisclosed location, one that was far removed from the prying eyes of the public and the pressures of his company. He had to get to the heart of the matter, to understand who this boy was and what he was really offering. When Alexander arrived, he looked the same as ever, calm, composed, his eyes glinting with an almost otherworldly knowledge. He didn't need to be told why Elon had asked to meet him. The boy seemed to know everything. You've come for the truth, Alexander said, his voice soft but sure. Elon nodded, his throat tight. Yes. I need to understand. What have you done to Xavier? What's happening to him? What's the cost? Alexander smiled, a small, knowing smile that made Elon's skin crawl. I've done nothing to him, Elon. I've merely shown him what was always there, what's always been there in all of us. We are not just bodies. We are energy, patterns, connections. And Xavier, like you, has the potential to see and manipulate those connections. To harness that energy. Elon shook his head, his frustration growing. I don't understand. Why Xavier? Why him? What makes him so special? Xavier is special because he is ready, Alexander replied simply. Most people are blind to what lies beneath the surface. They can't see the connections, the energy that flows through everything. But Xavier is different. He's always been different. He just needed the right catalyst. And what's that catalyst? Elon demanded. What did you do? Alexander's gaze grew intense. I didn't give him anything, Elon. I helped him realize his true nature. The same potential that lies within you, within everyone. But few ever awaken to it. Xavier was just the one who was ready. Elon was silent for a long moment, trying to digest what Alexander was saying. Was this some kind of experiment? Had he been using Xavier as a test subject? Or was it something more, something deeper? What's the price? Elon asked finally, his voice low. If Xavier can tap into this energy, what does it cost him? What does it cost anyone? Alexander's smile faded, and for the first time, Elon saw a hint of uncertainty in his eyes. That, Alexander said slowly, is something you'll have to discover for yourself. Elon felt a chill run through him. It wasn't just about Xavier anymore. It was about something far larger, a force, a power, that could change everything. And with that realization came a terrifying truth: they had crossed a line that they could never uncross. The only question left was whether they could control it. Elon's world felt as though it had been turned upside down. The more he tried to understand what Alexander was doing with Xavier, the more he realized how little he truly knew. Every answer he received only led to more questions, and each question felt like a thread unraveling a fabric he wasn't sure he could repair. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Elon found himself standing in the study again, staring out the window into the vast expanse of his property. His mind was a tangle of thoughts. What if Xavier was only the beginning? What if this unlocking of energy wasn't just something that could heal injuries, but something that could fundamentally alter humanity? And most troubling of all, what was the price? Tallulah entered the room, her steps soft on the marble floor. She noticed the tension in Elon's shoulders before he even turned to face her. "You've been working all day," she said, concern in her voice. "You need to take a break. It's not good for you to be so consumed by this." "I can't stop, Tallulah," Elon replied, his voice hoarse. "There's something bigger at play here. Something I can't ignore. What Alexander is doing with Xavier, it's not just healing. It's something more." Tallulah crossed the room and placed a hand on his arm. "I know you're scared. But you have to remember, Xavier is doing better. He's walking, he's thriving. Isn't that enough?" Elon shook his head. "No, it's not enough. What's happening to Xavier is beyond healing. It's as if he's tapping into something fundamental, something deeper than just science. And it's happening faster than I can keep up with. What if this power is too much for him? What if it's too much for all of us?" Tallulah hesitated for a moment before speaking. "We've always faced the unknown, Elon. You've made a career out of exploring the unknown, pushing boundaries. Maybe this is just the next frontier." Elon looked at her, the weight of her words sinking in. She was right, in a way. He had always been driven by the pursuit of knowledge, by the desire to understand and innovate. But this? This was something else entirely. This wasn't just about technology or progress, it was about the very fabric of human existence, the limits of human potential, and whether they could control it. "I'm not sure I can control it," Elon admitted. "I'm not even sure I can understand it. But I have to try." The days that followed were a blur of restless nights and endless research. Elon was driven, but he was also increasingly anxious. He couldn't escape the feeling that they were hurtling towards something they couldn't anticipate. As much as he tried to focus on Xavier's progress, the boy's growing abilities kept gnawing at him. Xavier was becoming different. And while that was a good thing in many ways, it also felt like a warning sign. One morning, after another intense session with Alexander, Xavier came to Elon with a new request. "Dad," he said, his voice calm but firm. "I want to show you something." Elon followed Xavier to the backyard, where the young boy stood in front of an old oak tree, its branches reaching high into the sky. Xavier's expression was focused, almost meditative, as he raised his hands toward the tree. "What are you doing?" Elon asked, a mixture of curiosity and concern in his voice. "I want to show you how it works," Xavier replied simply. Before Elon could respond, Xavier closed his eyes, and the air around him seemed to hum with energy. For a moment, nothing happened, but then, slowly, the ground beneath the tree began to tremble. The tree's branches shifted, as if stirred by an invisible force, and with a sudden crack, a branch broke free from the trunk and floated gently to the ground. Elon stood frozen, watching in disbelief. The boy hadn't touched the tree. He hadn't even moved from his spot. But the branch had moved as though it had been guided by some unseen hand. The power, the force that Xavier had tapped into, was real. What just happened? Elon asked, his voice barely a whisper. I can feel it, Xavier said, his voice distant as though he was speaking from a place far beyond the physical. There's a connection, Dad. Between everything. The tree, the ground, the sky. I can reach it, tap into it. It's all connected by energy. And I can move it. Elon's heart raced. He had seen things that defied logic before. He had built rockets, sent people to Mars, created technologies that seemed impossible just a few years ago. But this? This was different. This was something that didn't just challenge the laws of physics, it ignored them entirely. What does this mean, Xavier? Elon asked, his voice tight. It means, Xavier said, turning to face his father, his eyes filled with a mix of wonder and something darker, that I can do anything. I can change things. I can heal. I can move things. I can do things that no one else can. The air felt heavy, and for a moment, Elon felt a cold shiver run down his spine. This wasn't just about Xavier regaining his ability to walk. This was about something far more profound, something that could reshape the world. And as much as he wanted to celebrate his son's recovery, the magnitude of what was unfolding terrified him. Xavier, Elon said slowly, trying to keep his voice steady, you have to be careful with this. You can't just. I know, Dad, Xavier interrupted, his voice more serious than Elon had ever heard it. I know the power I have. But it's not about control. It's about understanding. Understanding how to use it, when to use it. And I can feel it, it's growing stronger. But I can handle it. I just need your help to understand how to use it. Elon swallowed, his thoughts racing. He wanted to believe Xavier, he wanted to believe that his son could handle this power, that he could control it. But deep down, Elon knew that this kind of power came with consequences. They were already seeing the changes in Xavier, but what would happen as the power grew? What would happen if Xavier could not control it? We need to talk to Alexander, Elon said finally, the decision clear in his mind. We need answers. But as the words left his mouth, Elon couldn't shake the growing sense of dread. They were no longer just dealing with a healing process, they were dealing with something far more dangerous, something that, if left unchecked, could consume them all. As they walked back toward the house, Elon couldn't help but wonder, was this the beginning of a new age for humanity? Or the beginning of its downfall? The only thing he knew for sure was that they had crossed a threshold from which there was no return. And the real challenge now was not just understanding what had happened, but surviving what came next. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The sun was setting as Elon paced around his private office, his mind spinning. Everything had changed. Every step they took seemed to lead them deeper into the unknown, deeper into something that felt like it might be too much to control. Xavier, his son, was tapping into powers that no human should possess. But the question echoed in Elon's mind, could Xavier control it? The logical part of Elon's brain told him that this wasn't possible. That nothing should be able to bend the natural laws of a universe the way Xavier was doing. But then, there was the boy's brilliance, the undeniable proof of his powers, and his own calmness when speaking of them. It was like Xavier had stepped into a new reality, one that Elon couldn't fully comprehend. He looked out the window, watching the last of the daylight slip away, and the first stars beginning to shine through. The sky had never seemed so full of possibilities, and yet so fraught with danger. He couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that something far greater was at play here, something that no one had fully grasped yet. And he needed to get to the bottom of it. He couldn't afford to be wrong, not with his son involved. Elon picked up his phone and dialed a number he'd been avoiding. Alexander, he said, his voice steady, though his heart was racing. I need to meet with you. Now. That evening, Elon met with Alexander in a discreet location, a quiet spot on the outskirts of the city, far removed from prying eyes. The place was empty, save for a few scattered chairs and a small table. The atmosphere felt sterile, almost clinical. And for a moment, Elon wasn't sure if it was the setting or his own growing sense of unease that made him feel as though he were stepping into the unknown. As soon as Alexander walked in, his calm demeanor filled the room like a force field. There was no rush in his movements, no urgency in his eyes. It was as if he knew something Elon didn't, something he couldn't quite articulate. Tell me, Elon, Alexander said, his voice soft yet piercing. What brings you here tonight? Elon didn't waste time. What's happening to Xavier? What have you done to him? Alexander didn't flinch. His gaze didn't waver. Nothing that hasn't always been there. I don't buy it, Elon replied, frustration beginning to seep into his voice. He can move things. He can bend reality. You're telling me that this is just natural. That this is always there. It's all part of the same process, Elon, Alexander said calmly, his words deliberate. Xavier has simply unlocked something within himself. Something that is available to every human. You've heard the term untapped potential, haven't you? Well, that's all it is. A matter of accessing the dormant forces inside. Dormant forces. Alexander, the power he's exhibiting is, Elon stopped himself. He was about to say something he didn't understand, but that's exactly the problem. He didn't understand. You're telling me this is just the beginning? That everyone has this ability? That Xavier is the first? Not the first, Alexander interrupted, his voice smooth. Just the one who is ready. His body was damaged, yes, but the injury was an opportunity, a catalyst. We used his condition to awaken his potential. It's always been inside of him. But now he sees it. Feels it. Elon clenched his fists at his sides, trying to control the frustration that bubbled up inside him. And how exactly did you do this? Alexander's lips curled into a faint, almost knowing smile. It wasn't me, Elon. It was Xavier. All I did was guide him. Show him the way. Elon's mind raced. So, you've just been pushing him further into this awakening. And you have no idea where it will lead? Alexander shook his head slowly. I know exactly where it leads. I've seen it before. But it's not for me to explain. It's for Xavier to understand. I've only helped him find his way. What he does with it, what you do with it, is entirely up to him. Up to him. Elon repeated, disbelief and anger mixing in his voice. He's a child, Alexander. He shouldn't have to carry this burden. He doesn't even fully understand what's happening to him, and you're asking him to control it? You underestimate Xavier, Alexander said, his tone shifting just slightly, but with an edge of something deeper. You're thinking too small. Xavier is ready for this. You think he's just a child because of his age, but his mind, his awareness, it's beyond that. This is not something we control, Elon. This is something we let unfold. Elon's chest tightened. The hairs on the back of his neck stood on end as he absorbed Alexander's words. What was he really saying? That Xavier was ready to embrace something that could change everything? Or that Xavier would be consumed by it? I can't let this happen, Elon said, his voice low but firm. Not without understanding. Not without knowing what the consequences will be. You've unleashed something, and I'm not going to sit back and let it take my son without knowing exactly what's at stake. You're afraid of what you can't control, Alexander said. His voice was no longer soothing, it was piercing, cutting through the tension like a blade. But that's the point, isn't it? It's about surrender, Elon. Surrendering to the flow of life, to the unknown. It's not about controlling everything, it's about embracing what's coming. Elon's pulse quickened. He had never felt more exposed, more vulnerable in his life. He had built rockets that reached Mars, and technologies that pushed the limits of human achievement. But this was different. This was not science. It wasn't technology. It was something primal, something that made him feel small and powerless. "I need to know how to protect him," Elon said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. He wasn't speaking to Alexander anymore. He was speaking to himself. "I need to know how to protect my son." Alexander regarded him quietly for a long moment, as if weighing his words carefully. Then, with a soft exhale, he spoke. "The only way to protect him is to let him walk this path. You can't protect him from the future, Elon. You can only help him face it." As Elon left the meeting, he felt a chill settle deep in his bones. He had learned nothing concrete. Alexander's words, his assurances, had done nothing but raise more questions. What had he really awakened in Xavier? And was this power a gift, or a curse? He had always prided himself on being able to solve problems, to find the solution no matter how complex. But this? This was beyond him. He couldn't fix it with technology. He couldn't engineer his way out of this one. As he drove home in the dark, the silence in the car was oppressive. Every mile felt like a descent into something deeper, darker. He couldn't protect Xavier from this. He couldn't protect himself from it either. But he couldn't let go. He had to figure it out. For Xavier. For his family. For the world. As the car pulled into the driveway, Elon's thoughts lingered on one simple truth: the real test was just beginning. The house was silent when Elon arrived home that night, an unsettling quiet that pressed against his chest like a heavy weight. He stepped inside, his thoughts still clouded by his conversation with Alexander. What was the true nature of Xavier's powers? Was it all really as harmless as Alexander seemed to imply? Or was this only the beginning of something far darker than he was ready to face? As he moved through the house, Elon couldn't help but notice how things had changed since Xavier's recovery. The boy had been walking, running, thriving in ways that defied logic and reason. But it wasn't just his body that had healed, there was something more. His mind, his energy, his very presence had transformed. There was a quiet intensity about Xavier now, something that was both thrilling and unnerving. Elon entered the living room and found Tallulah sitting by the fire. She looked up as he entered, her face reflecting the concern she had been holding since the first signs of Xavier's transformation had become clear. "How did it go?" Tallulah asked softly, her voice filled with both curiosity and worry. Elon hesitated, then sat beside her. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration and confusion marking his features. "I don't know what to think anymore. Alexander, he says Xavier is just tapping into a latent potential, something we all have within us. But the more I see, the more I feel like we're standing on the edge of a precipice. If this power grows any stronger." "You're afraid," Tallulah interrupted, her tone gentle yet firm. "Afraid of what it might mean for Xavier. For us." "I'm afraid of what I don't understand," Elon said, his voice low. "And I'm afraid that we're too late. That we're already too deep into this. Xavier is different now, Tallulah. He can do things that are impossible." "I've seen it," she said, nodding slowly. "I've seen how he's changed. But he's still our son. We have to trust him. We have to trust ourselves to help him navigate this. Whatever this is." Elon looked at Tallulah, his eyes searching for the right words, but none came. The truth was, he didn't know how to navigate this. His mind, once clear and methodical, now felt clouded by uncertainty. He had built an empire based on logic and science, yet now he was standing on the precipice of something that defied both. He didn't know what to do, or who to turn to. All he knew was that his son was changing, and that change might not be something they could control. That night, after Tallulah had gone to bed, Elon found himself in the study once more, his fingers hovering over the keyboard of his computer. The familiar hum of the machine should have been comforting, but instead, it felt distant, almost foreign. Elon had never felt more out of place in his own home. The comfortable walls of science and technology were crumbling around him, and he had no idea how to rebuild them. He leaned back in his chair, staring out at the night sky through the large window. The stars twinkled above, each one a distant beacon of light in the vast, unknown universe. But tonight, the sky felt more ominous than it ever had before. Elon's thoughts drifted back to his conversation with Alexander. There was so much that didn't add up, so much that felt off. And yet, he couldn't deny the truth that was staring him in the face: Xavier's abilities were real. And they were growing stronger by the day. He stood up abruptly, unable to stay seated any longer. He needed answers. He needed to understand what was happening to his son before it was too late. He couldn't afford to wait any longer. The next morning, Elon woke to the sound of footsteps outside his bedroom. He groggily opened his eyes, rubbing his face, and turned toward the window. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a soft golden light across the room. It should have been peaceful, but instead, a strange sense of urgency clawed at him. He stood up and quickly dressed, pulling on a jacket as he headed downstairs. The house was still quiet, but it felt different now. There was something electric in the air, as though everything was on the verge of change. He found Xavier in the kitchen, standing by the counter, quietly drinking a glass of water. "Good morning, Dad," Xavier said, not looking up as he set the glass down and turned toward him. "Xavier, I need to talk to you," Elon said, his voice sharp with concern. "About what's happening to you." Xavier's eyes met his father's, and for a moment, Elon saw a flicker of something he hadn't seen before, something that made his heart sink. It was a calmness, an awareness in the boy's gaze that felt too mature. Too knowing. "I know, Dad," Xavier said, his voice almost too calm. "I know what you're thinking. And I know you're worried." Elon's stomach twisted. "How do you know?" "Because I can feel it," Xavier replied. "I can feel the weight of it. It's like everything I touch is alive. It's like I can reach out and connect with everything around me. I can feel the energy in the air. In the earth. In you. It's overwhelming, but it's also beautiful." Elon felt a chill sweep over him. This wasn't the Xavier he had known. This boy was different. Not just physically, but mentally. And as much as he wanted to believe that Xavier was just a child learning to cope with a new reality, something told him that this power was beyond anything he could control. "What's going to happen, Xavier?" Elon asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Where is this leading?" Xavier paused, looking at his father with an intensity that seemed to bore straight into him. "I don't know yet. But I can feel it. This is just the beginning." That evening, after a day of uneasy silence, Elon stood by the window once again, gazing out into the dark horizon. He knew one thing for certain: everything was changing. And nothing would ever be the same. He had tried to prepare for the unknown, to plan for the future. But this wasn't something he could plan for. This wasn't something he could control. As the night grew darker, Elon realized that the only thing left to do was to brace himself for whatever was coming next. He wasn't sure how far this journey would go, or how much of it he could survive. But one thing was clear: whatever Xavier was becoming, it was going to change everything. And Elon could only hope that it was for the better. But deep down, a small part of him feared that they had already crossed the line into something irreversible. And that fear gnawed at him, no matter how hard he tried to push it away. The next phase was approaching fast, and the real test had only just begun. The following weeks passed in a haze. The mornings felt the same, quiet, ordinary, except for the palpable tension that hung in the air. Elon kept a close eye on Xavier, studying him carefully. The changes were becoming more pronounced, more intense. Xavier's powers were growing stronger, more uncontrollable, and more unpredictable by the day. But it wasn't just the power itself that unsettled Elon, it was the boy's demeanor. Xavier had become more withdrawn, more introspective. He spoke less, but when he did, his words were profound, almost too wise for his age. It was as if the boy was stepping into a realm that Elon couldn't follow. The deeper Xavier went into this transformation, the further Elon felt he was being left behind. Tallulah noticed it too. She had always been the voice of reason, the one who calmed Elon when his thoughts spiraled out of control. But now, she seemed just as unsettled. Their once sturdy family dynamic was slowly unraveling, and they were helpless to stop it. One morning, as Elon sat at the breakfast table, his eyes fixed on the papers in front of him, he felt a subtle shift in the atmosphere. The hairs on the back of his neck prickled, and a feeling of dread settled in his gut. He looked up from his papers to find Xavier standing in the doorway, his posture rigid, his expression unreadable. Elon's heart skipped a beat. There was something different about Xavier today. The boy's gaze was distant, almost like he was looking through Elon, rather than at him. The air around him seemed to hum with energy, an invisible force that made the room feel both heavier and more electric at the same time. "Xavier?" Elon said, his voice softer than he intended. "What's wrong?" Xavier didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked over to the window, staring out at the garden, his gaze distant. The world outside was bathed in soft morning light, but inside, there was an eerie stillness. "I'm starting to understand it," Xavier said, his voice unusually calm, though there was an edge to it that Elon couldn't quite place. "What this power is, what it means. I'm starting to feel the connection. It's like the world is, alive in a way I never imagined. Like everything is connected. I can feel it all." Elon stood up slowly, his pulse quickening. "Xavier, what are you talking about? This isn't just some feeling. This power, it's something we can't control. You have to understand that." Xavier turned to face him, and for the first time in weeks, Elon saw a flicker of emotion in his eyes, something raw, something desperate. "I don't need to control it," Xavier replied, his voice firm. "I just need to let it be. It's not about control, Dad. It's about understanding. And right now, I'm starting to understand. I'm starting to see things that," he paused, his brow furrowing. "Things that I don't think I should be seeing. But I can't stop it. It's already happening." Elon took a step toward him, his hand instinctively reaching out, but Xavier stepped back, shaking his head. "You don't understand, Dad," Xavier said quietly. "This is bigger than you. Bigger than all of us." Elon's heart sank. He had never heard Xavier speak like this before. It was as if the boy had transcended everything that was once familiar to him, his family, his life, his world. It was as if he was becoming someone, or something, else. "I'm scared, Xavier," Elon admitted, his voice trembling with a mixture of fear and desperation. "I'm scared of what's happening to you. And I'm scared of losing you." Xavier's expression softened, just for a moment. He stepped forward, placing a hand on his father's shoulder. The touch was light, but there was a strange warmth in it, one that made Elon's chest tighten. "You're not going to lose me, Dad," Xavier said quietly. "I'm still me. I'm just different now. And I can't go back. None of us can." The words hung in the air like a silent promise, or a warning. Elon wasn't sure which. His son was slipping away from him, and he couldn't stop it. He could feel it in every fiber of his being. But before Elon could say anything more, Xavier turned abruptly, heading toward the door. "I need to go," he said, his voice distant. "I need to figure this out. I need to see it for myself. I need to understand what's happening inside me." Elon opened his mouth to protest, but the words caught in his throat. He couldn't stop him. He knew that. Xavier had already made up his mind. There was nothing left for him to do but watch as his son stepped into the unknown. Xavier left without another word, leaving Elon and Tallulah in an oppressive silence. The house, which had once been filled with the sounds of their children's laughter and warmth, now felt cold and empty. Elon stood by the window, staring out at the empty driveway. His mind raced with questions, but there were no answers. He didn't know where Xavier had gone, and he didn't know if he would come back. "We have to find him," Tallulah said, her voice shaking slightly as she stood beside him. "Elon, he's our son. He's in danger." "I don't know where to start," Elon admitted, his voice low. "I can't track him down like a machine, like I do with everything else. This is different." "I know," Tallulah whispered. "But we can't just sit here and do nothing. We have to help him. He's not just some experiment, Elon. He's our child." Elon nodded slowly, though his mind was already spinning, trying to piece together a plan. He had to find Xavier. He had to understand what was happening to him, before it was too late. But deep down, Elon knew the truth. He couldn't protect Xavier from this. Whatever force had been awakened in his son was far beyond his comprehension. And that terrified him. As the day wore on, Elon couldn't shake the feeling that they had crossed a line. That something irreversible had happened when Xavier first unlocked his powers. He had seen glimpses of it in his son's eyes, the quiet understanding that this power wasn't just a gift, but a burden. Xavier was carrying something heavy, something far beyond his years. And no matter how hard Elon tried to hold on to the past, to the boy he had known, it was clear that Xavier was no longer that child. The boy was evolving, stepping into a new world, one where Elon could no longer follow. By the time night fell, Elon was no closer to finding Xavier than he had been that morning. But as he sat in the darkened study, staring at the empty chair across from him, one thought echoed in his mind: whatever was coming, it was too late to turn back now. The next few days were a blur of unease and helplessness. Elon barely slept, his mind constantly racing. He and Tallulah had put out every effort to track Xavier down, but there was no trace of him anywhere. His son had vanished, leaving behind nothing but cryptic words and an overwhelming sense of dread. The boy had said it himself: he was different now, and there was nothing that could change that. In the quiet of their home, the weight of the situation pressed down on them, suffocating any sense of normalcy. Tallulah kept herself busy with everyday tasks, trying to maintain some semblance of routine, but Elon couldn't stop thinking about Xavier. He couldn't stop thinking about the power his son had tapped into and what it meant for them all. But just as hope began to wane, Elon received a call. The phone rang, its shrill sound cutting through the silence of the house. Elon's heart skipped a beat as he grabbed the phone from the kitchen counter, his breath catching in his throat. "Hello? Mr. Musk," came the voice on the other end. It was unfamiliar, but the tone was urgent, almost desperate. "We've found him." Elon's pulse quickened. "Where?" "He's at a facility just outside the city. A research center. We've been tracking his movements. It seems he's been there for days now. We're not sure how he got there or what he's been doing, but we need to act quickly." Elon barely registered the words. His mind was already moving, formulating a plan. His son was at a research facility. A place where they were studying him. He gritted his teeth, his frustration rising. "Who are you?" Elon demanded. "What is this facility? And why is Xavier there?" "We'll explain everything when you arrive," the voice said. "But time is critical, Mr. Musk. Please, come quickly." Elon didn't waste another moment. He turned to Tallulah, who had heard the phone conversation and was already preparing for what was to come. "We're going to find him," Elon said, his voice firm, though the uncertainty lingered beneath the surface. The drive to the research center felt endless. The city's lights blurred past them, the night air heavy with anticipation. Elon's hands gripped the steering wheel with a force that left his knuckles white, his mind spinning with questions and fears. What had Xavier been doing at this facility? Why hadn't he reached out? And most importantly, what had happened to him since the last time they saw him? As they neared the outskirts of the city, the landscape shifted. The bustling streets gave way to empty fields, the tall buildings replaced by small, industrial structures that loomed like sentinels in the night. Elon's heart raced as the car finally turned down a long, narrow road leading to the center. The facility was massive, an imposing complex of steel and glass, surrounded by high fences and guarded gates. "Stay close," Elon muttered to Tallulah as he parked the car. His eyes scanned the perimeter, noticing the heavy security. This wasn't just a research facility. It was a fortress. They approached the entrance cautiously, the cold night air biting at their skin. The facility seemed completely still, eerily silent, as if it were waiting for something to happen. When they reached the door, a man in a lab coat greeted them. His face was tense, his eyes darting around as if he feared being watched. "Mr. Musk, Mrs. Musk," he said, ushering them inside. "Please, follow me. We don't have much time." Elon followed closely behind, his mind racing. The facility was sterile and cold, the walls lined with harsh fluorescent lights that seemed to pulse in rhythm with his increasing anxiety. The man led them down several corridors, all of them unmarked and devoid of personal touches. It felt like walking through a labyrinth of forgotten promises and secret experiments. Finally, they arrived at a heavy metal door. The man hesitated before entering a code into the keypad next to it, the sound of the locks clicking open loud in the silence. "Please," the man said, motioning for them to step inside. Elon's heart skipped a beat. There, standing in the center of the room, was Xavier. But this wasn't the Xavier he remembered. The boy who had once been full of life, who had struggled to walk, to live, he was now something else entirely. His eyes were wide and unblinking, glowing faintly with an otherworldly light. He was standing tall, not a hint of the weakness or frailty he had once had. But it wasn't just his physical form that had changed. It was the energy that radiated from him. It was palpable, almost as if the room itself had shifted, responding to his presence. "Xavier?" Tallulah's voice cracked as she stepped forward, reaching out toward him. "What's happened to you?" Xavier's gaze slowly shifted toward them. His expression was unreadable, distant, as though he was seeing them through a fog. "I told you, Mom," he said quietly, his voice almost echoing. "I'm different now. This is who I am. Who I was always meant to be." Elon felt a wave of panic surge through him. "What have they done to you?" he demanded. "Where are we? What's going on here, Xavier?" The boy's lips curled into a faint, almost sad smile. "This is where I can understand it. This is where I can see it all. They've been helping me, Dad. Helping me unlock it." "Unlock what?" Elon's voice was low, but the anger in it was unmistakable. "The power inside of me," Xavier answered. "The one that's always been there. The one I've just learned to see. I can feel everything, Dad. Every part of the world. Every atom. Every breath. I can see all of it. I can see how it all connects." Elon's heart sank as the weight of his words hit him. This wasn't just about Xavier's ability to walk again. This was about something much larger. Something that had the potential to change everything. But what kind of power was Xavier truly wielding? And what would become of him once it was fully realized? Before Elon could ask another question, the door behind them slammed shut with a deafening sound. The lights flickered, and the room seemed to pulse with energy, vibrating at a frequency that sent chills down Elon's spine. Suddenly, the walls seemed to close in. The very air in the room thickened, becoming harder to breathe. Elon turned to Xavier, his eyes wide with realization. Xavier wasn't just tapping into a power. He was becoming it. And at that moment, Elon knew, they had crossed a threshold. There was no going back. The question now wasn't whether they could save Xavier. It was whether anyone could stop what he was becoming. The room around Elon felt like it was closing in. The air was dense, heavy with a strange energy that seemed to vibrate in his chest. He turned to look at Xavier, whose once familiar face now held a serene, almost detached expression. There was no sign of the boy Elon had raised, the curious, determined child who had fought to overcome his disability. In his place was someone else. Someone who seemed beyond reach. Tallulah's voice broke the silence, her words trembling with fear. Xavier, please, talk to us. You're not yourself. We need you to come home. Xavier didn't respond immediately. His gaze drifted to the floor, his hands clenched at his sides, as if he was deep in thought. After what felt like an eternity, he looked up at his parents. I am myself, Mom. I'm more myself than I've ever been, Xavier said slowly. His voice was calm, but there was a strange intensity to it. This power, this connection, I can't explain it, but I can feel it. And it's the only thing that makes sense now. It's the only thing that's real. Elon's chest tightened. He could hear the words, but they felt like they were coming from someone else. This wasn't the Xavier who had learned to walk again. This wasn't the son who had struggled and fought through every challenge. This was something else. He tried to keep his voice steady. Xavier, we know you're going through something. We understand that. But you need to stop this. You don't know what you're doing. This power, it's not just something that can be controlled. It's dangerous. Xavier stepped forward, his eyes glowing faintly with that eerie light that had become more pronounced in the last few days. His expression softened, but there was something implacable about it. I'm not dangerous, Dad. I'm not the one who's dangerous. His voice dropped lower, almost a whisper. The world is. Elon felt a chill run down his spine. What do you mean, Xavier? For the first time, Xavier's expression darkened. His gaze grew distant, as though he was seeing something far beyond the walls of the facility, beyond the room they stood in. I've seen it. I've seen the future. The world is changing. And not for the better. The world's been broken for so long, and nobody has been able to fix it. But I can. I can fix it. Elon shook his head, panic rising. You don't know what you're saying. You can't just go around changing the world, Xavier. This power, it's not just about fixing things, it's about control. And if you're not careful, it will consume you. Tallulah stepped closer, her voice trembling with a mixture of hope and fear. Xavier, please listen to your father. We want to help you. But you need to come home. This isn't you. For a brief moment, Xavier hesitated. His face softened, and his eyes flickered with uncertainty. It was the first time since they'd arrived that Elon saw a crack in the boy's resolve. But it was only a momentary lapse. Xavier blinked and the resolve returned. I can't go back, Xavier whispered. I've already seen too much. I've already felt too much. I can't pretend that I'm not meant for something more. The power is too great, too all-encompassing. I have to follow it, no matter where it leads. Elon's heart ached as he looked at his son. This wasn't the boy who had once cried in his arms after struggling to take his first steps. This was someone, or something, else. A being who had connected with a force far beyond his control. Elon, Tallulah said softly, placing a hand on his arm. We have to do something. We can't just let him walk away. But Elon didn't know what they could do. He couldn't just take Xavier back home, he couldn't force his son to be the child he had been before. The truth was that Xavier was no longer the same person. And the terrifying part was that Elon didn't know if the world, or even their family, was ready for the changes Xavier was going to bring. For the next few hours, Elon and Tallulah stayed at the facility, waiting for answers, trying to make sense of everything that had happened. But the longer they stayed, the more the reality set in. The people at the research center were only willing to give them so much information, and it was clear that whatever was happening to Xavier was more than just an experiment. It was a force that no one fully understood. Elon couldn't help but feel the weight of guilt pressing down on him. Had he done this? Had his relentless pursuit of innovation, of progress, led them down this path? Had his desire to change the world, his obsession with pushing boundaries, opened the door to something that could destroy everything? As they were about to leave, the head of the research center, Dr. Emma Chandler, approached them. She was a tall woman with sharp eyes, a scientist through and through, but there was a certain hesitancy in her step as she walked toward Elon and Tallulah. "We need to talk," she said quietly, glancing over her shoulder as though ensuring they weren't being overheard. "There's something you don't know about Xavier's situation. Something we've been keeping from you." Elon's stomach tightened. "What is it?" he demanded. Dr. Chandler paused for a moment, her eyes darting nervously. "Xavier isn't the only one. There are others like him, people with extraordinary abilities who are being trained, monitored. We've been working on a project, a global initiative, to harness these powers. But Xavier, he's different. His connection is deeper, more profound than we realized. And it's getting stronger by the day." Elon felt a cold shiver run down his spine. "What do you mean by others? How many?" Dr. Chandler hesitated, her gaze flickering. "We've been trying to control it. But it's out of our hands now." "Xavier is." "Is what?" Elon demanded, his voice rising. "Tell me everything, Dr. Chandler. Now." Her eyes met his, and for the first time, Elon saw fear in them. "Xavier is the key. He's the one who can unlock it all. He can change the course of human history, whether he realizes it or not." Elon felt his breath catch in his throat. The weight of her words hung in the air like a thick fog. His son wasn't just part of something big. He was the catalyst. And that meant the world was about to change in ways they couldn't even begin to comprehend. And no matter how much Elon wanted to protect Xavier from it all, it was already too late. Xavier had crossed the line. Now, the only question left was, what would happen next? Elon's mind raced as he left the research facility, Tallulah following closely behind. The weight of Dr. Chandler's words hung in the air, suffocating him with a terrifying sense of helplessness. The world was no longer a place of predictable rules and boundaries. The rules of science and nature that he had spent his life studying had been shattered in an instant. "He's the key," Dr. Chandler had said, her voice full of quiet, desperate urgency. "Xavier has the power to change everything. But change what? And at what cost?" Elon couldn't escape the thought that it was all his fault. His obsession with pushing the limits of human potential had led them down this dark, uncharted path. He had always believed that technology and innovation could solve every problem, that progress could heal wounds and solve the world's greatest challenges. But what if this was the ultimate cost of that belief? He looked at Tallulah, her face pale, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and confusion. She had always been the emotional anchor between them, the one who balanced his ambition with her deep compassion. But even she seemed at a loss for words now. "Do you think we can bring him back?" Tallulah's voice was small, as though she feared even speaking the question aloud. Elon swallowed hard, his thoughts a tangled mess of doubt and determination. He wanted to say yes. He wanted to believe that there was still hope for Xavier, that they could somehow reverse whatever transformation had taken place. But the truth was, he didn't know. And the deeper they delved into this, the more he feared the possibility that they might never have their son back. "Xavier's not gone," Elon said, trying to steady his voice. "He's still in there somewhere. But something is happening to him, something bigger than any of us can control. We need to figure out what that is and stop it before it goes too far." As the car sped down the highway, the city lights flickering in the rearview mirror, Elon's mind wandered to the days before all of this, before the research center, before Xavier's miraculous recovery, before everything had changed. It all felt so distant now, like a dream that had unraveled. The boy he had known, the boy who had struggled to walk, who had smiled at the smallest victories, was gone. In his place stood someone, something, who saw the world through a different lens, a lens that only he could understand. And that lens wasn't just altering his perception. It was altering reality itself. By the time they arrived home, it was already late into the night. The house, which had once felt like a safe haven, now felt empty and hollow. Elon couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the edge of something dark and irreversible. The door closed behind them with a soft thud, but the silence that followed was deafening. "Elon," Tallulah said softly, her voice trembling as she placed a hand on his arm. "What are we going to do?" "I don't know," he admitted, the weight of the situation bearing down on him. "But we can't just sit here and wait for it to consume him. We need to find out who else is involved in this. We need to figure out what they've done to him, and why." Tallulah nodded, but her eyes were distant, lost in thought. "And what if there's no way back? What if we can't stop it?" Elon's heart sank at the thought. The fear that he might lose Xavier forever felt like a crushing weight. But he couldn't let that fear paralyze him. He couldn't give up on his son. Not when there was a chance, however small, that they could still find a way to bring him back. "We'll figure it out," Elon said, his voice firm, though doubt still lingered at the edges. "We have to. For Xavier." The following days were a whirlwind of frantic research, late-night calls, and meetings with people who might have answers, but who only seemed to add to the confusion. They met with scientists, old colleagues of Elon's, some who had worked with him on past projects, and even a few who had been involved with the research center. But all of them spoke in vague terms, hesitant to share any concrete details. It was clear that there was more at play here than any of them had anticipated. Elon began to dig deeper into the origins of the research center, but every lead seemed to vanish into thin air. The facility was a black hole, a secretive operation with ties to people and organizations that seemed just out of reach. Every time Elon thought he was close to finding an answer, it would slip away. At night, when the house was quiet and Tallulah had gone to bed, Elon would sit in front of his computer, running calculations, reading documents, and trying to piece together the puzzle that had started with Xavier's miraculous recovery and had spiraled into something far more dangerous. His mind raced with the implications of everything they had discovered, and the fear that it might already be too late to stop the inevitable. He couldn't help but wonder, what if Xavier had already made up his mind? What if his son had already chosen this path, and there was nothing they could do to change it? It was late one evening when Elon finally received the call he had been dreading. His phone rang, the number unfamiliar, but the urgency and the tone of the voice on the other end made his blood run cold. "Elon Musk?" the voice asked. "Yes," Elon replied, his heart pounding. "This is Dr. Chandler again," the voice continued, sounding strained. "We've lost contact with Xavier. He's gone. He's taken something, some kind of device we had been working on. It's not just the power we were monitoring. He's taken something far more dangerous. And now we can't find him. We don't know where he is, but I'm telling you now, we're all in danger." Elon's throat went dry. "What are you talking about? What did he take?" Dr. Chandler's voice cracked. "It's a device that amplifies the powers. It's unstable, Elon. If he uses it, it could destroy everything. We don't have much time. We have to find him." Elon's heart pounded in his chest. This was the moment he had feared, the moment when Xavier's power would spiral beyond anyone's control. The boy had become more than human, more than they could ever have imagined. "Elon," Tallulah said softly, her hand on his shoulder, as if sensing the shift in the atmosphere. "What's happening?" "They've lost him," Elon whispered, his voice hollow. "He's gone. And if we don't stop him, we're all going to pay the price." The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. They were no longer just searching for their son. They were searching for a force that had the potential to change, or end, the world as they knew it. And they might not be able to stop it. The following days passed in a blur of urgency and fear. Elon, Tallulah, and the team from the research facility scrambled to track down any sign of Xavier. Elon felt an overwhelming sense of dread gnawing at his insides. His son, the one he had dedicated his life to protecting, was no longer just a boy who had been healed through a miraculous process. He was something else, something dangerous. Elon's mind raced with possibilities, each darker than the last. He couldn't shake the feeling that Xavier had already made up his mind. He wasn't just trying to heal the world, he was trying to reshape it in his own image, with powers that no one fully understood. "We need to go to the last known location," Dr. Chandler urged, her voice crackling through the phone line. "It's an old facility we used for early experiments. We think he might have gone there." Elon turned to Tallulah, his face grim. "We have to move now. The longer we wait, the harder it will be to find him." Tallulah nodded, her face pale and full of fear. "What if he doesn't want to come back, Elon? What if he's already made up his mind?" Elon closed his eyes briefly, fighting the guilt that threatened to overwhelm him. He had never felt so powerless in his life. The son he had raised, the child he had nurtured, had become someone he could no longer reach. "We have to try," he said softly, his voice firm despite the turmoil inside. "If we don't, it might be too late for Xavier, and for the world." The journey to the old facility was long, the air thick with uncertainty. Elon couldn't help but replay the events in his mind over and over. How had they gotten here? How had a simple desire to help their son turn into something this terrifying? He glanced over at Tallulah, who had remained silent for the most part. Her face was drawn, her eyes focused ahead, as though she were preparing herself for whatever they might find at the end of this journey. Elon knew she was just as scared as he was. But unlike him, she was a mother, and her heart had been torn in ways he couldn't even begin to comprehend. The car finally pulled up to the facility. The building was abandoned, a hulking concrete structure half concealed by overgrown trees and thick vines. It looked like a ghost of a place long forgotten. The air around it was thick, heavy with the feeling of something unspeakable that had transpired within its walls. "This is it," Dr. Chandler said, her voice shaky as she emerged from the car. Xavier was always drawn to places like this. He was different. He understood things others couldn't, saw things they couldn't even imagine. "I just never thought he'd take it this far." "Where is he?" Elon demanded, his voice sharper than he intended. "Where's Xavier now?" Dr. Chandler hesitated. "We think he's inside. There's a set of underground chambers that were part of our earlier experiments. They're heavily shielded. It's where we kept the most dangerous technologies." The mention of dangerous technologies sent a shiver through Elon's spine. His mind raced as they made their way toward the entrance, the weight of what they might find growing heavier with each step. They descended into the depths of the building, the air damp and stale. The walls were lined with machinery and cables, remnants of experiments long abandoned. The further they went, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. Elon could feel the oppressive energy of the place, as if it were alive, pulsing with a dark undercurrent. "Xavier?" Elon called out into the darkness, his voice echoing off the cold concrete. There was no answer. Just the sound of their footsteps echoing in the silence. They reached the deepest chamber, and as they entered, Elon's breath caught in his throat. There, in the center of the room, stood Xavier. He was not the boy Elon remembered. This figure, this being, was something else entirely. His once familiar face was now eerily calm, almost emotionless. His eyes, however, were a storm of energy, glowing faintly with an otherworldly light. His hands were raised, palms open, and there was a strange device hovering before him, swirling with energy. Elon's heart clenched in fear. "Xavier, stop," he shouted. "You have to stop this. This power, it's too much for anyone to control. Xavier's gaze shifted slowly toward his father. For a moment, his expression softened, and for an instant, Elon saw the boy he used to know. But that fleeting moment quickly vanished, replaced by an emotionless mask. "I'm not the same anymore, Dad," Xavier said, his voice calm, almost too calm. "This power, it's not something I can just turn off. It's part of me now. And it's the only thing that makes sense in this broken world." Tallulah stepped forward, her voice trembling. "Xavier, please, don't do this. This isn't you. You're not this thing." Xavier's eyes flickered with something, regret, perhaps, or a flicker of the boy he once was, but then it was gone, buried under the weight of something much darker. "You don't understand, Mom. This is who I am now. I'm not bound by the same rules. I'm above them." He paused for a moment, his expression unreadable. "I've seen what's coming. I've seen the future. And I'm the only one who can stop it. The world is too broken to be saved by anyone else. I have to fix it." Elon took a step forward, his heart aching. "Xavier, you can't control this power. You don't know what you're doing. Please, come back. We can help you." For a long moment, Xavier just stared at his father, as though considering his words. Then, slowly, he raised the device, and a pulse of energy filled the room. The walls seemed to tremble as if the very foundation of reality was being warped. "I can't go back," Xavier whispered, his voice distant and resigned. "And neither can you." Before Elon could respond, the energy pulsed again, and the room seemed to explode with light and sound. The air crackled with power, and Elon instinctively reached for Tallulah, pulling her toward him to shield her from the overwhelming force. But even as the chaos swirled around them, Elon could feel a sense of finality settling in. Xavier had made his choice. There was no turning back. The world as they knew it was about to change. And there was nothing they could do to stop it. As the light subsided and the noise faded, they found themselves standing in the center of a vast, empty space. The facility was gone. The building had crumbled into dust, leaving nothing behind but the raw energy of Xavier's power, swirling in the air like a dark cloud. And Xavier was gone. Elon stood in the ruins, staring into the abyss that had once been his son. There was no hope left in his heart. No plan. No solution. Only a terrifying realization. Xavier hadn't just taken control of the power. He had become the power. And now, the world would feel the consequences. The world had changed. It wasn't just the building that had collapsed. It was everything, everything Elon had known, everything he had fought for, everything that had ever seemed stable and predictable. Elon stood in the ruins of the facility, his mind blank, his thoughts scattered like broken glass. He couldn't grasp what had just happened. He couldn't understand how it had gone this far. How Xavier, his son, had transformed into something so other. How, in his attempt to save him, Elon had only pushed him further away from the family they had once been. Tallulah's voice broke through his fog of confusion, a sharp, trembling whisper. "Elon, where's Xavier? Where did he go?" Elon turned to her, but he didn't have an answer. Xavier was gone, physically, at least. The boy they had known was no longer there. What was left was something that Elon couldn't comprehend, a force so far beyond human understanding. "Xavier's not gone," Elon murmured, more to himself than to Tallulah. He's still here. But we don't know where." Tallulah's face twisted in pain, her eyes full of fear and uncertainty. "What do you mean, he's still here?" The words felt hollow as Elon spoke them. He's become something else. Something bigger. This power he's tapped into, it's not just in him anymore. It's in everything." The air around them seemed to crackle with the remnants of the energy Xavier had unleashed. Elon felt the ground under his feet tremble faintly, as if the world itself was adjusting to the new reality Xavier had created. "I've seen what he's capable of now," Elon continued, trying to steady his voice. "This power, it's not just about healing anymore. He has control over more than just matter. He's controlling the very fabric of reality." Tallulah stepped closer to him, her face a mixture of sorrow and resolve. "What do we do now? How do we find him? How do we stop him?" Elon didn't have an answer. Not yet. He had to find a way, but the more he thought about it, the more he realized there might not be a way to stop Xavier. Not without risking everything else. He glanced at Dr. Chandler, who had been standing off to the side, her face pale, her expression one of quiet horror. She had seen the transformation. She had known that this was possible, but now that it had happened, she was just as lost as the rest of them. "There's no way to reverse this, is there?" Tallulah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Chandler looked at her, her eyes filled with regret. "Not unless we can somehow sever Xavier from the source of his power. But that's something no one has ever attempted before. It's beyond our understanding." Elon felt the weight of her words settle over him like a heavy blanket. If no one had ever attempted to sever this kind of power, what were the odds that they could succeed where everyone else had failed? "What about the device?" Elon asked, his voice shaking slightly. "The one he was using before, can we destroy it? Can we stop him by taking it away?" Dr. Chandler shook her head slowly. "The device isn't just a tool, Elon. It's part of him now. Trying to destroy it might trigger an irreversible chain reaction." Elon ran a hand through his hair, frustrated, exhausted, and utterly out of options. "So we're supposed to just let him do whatever he wants? Let him reshape the world in his image?" "No," Tallulah said firmly, her eyes locked on Elon's. "We won't give up on him. We'll find a way. There has to be a way." Elon took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her words. "I want to believe that, Tallulah. I really do. But the truth is, I don't know if we can save him anymore." Days passed. Elon couldn't sleep, couldn't think straight. His mind was consumed with thoughts of Xavier and the power that had overtaken him. The world outside seemed to be slipping into chaos, a reflection of what was happening inside his own heart. News reports were flooding in about strange, unexplained phenomena. People were reporting flickers in reality, moments where the laws of physics seemed to bend and twist. And some people had started claiming to see figures in the sky, beings made of light and energy, figures that looked too much like Xavier to be coincidental. Elon kept his focus on the task at hand, though. He couldn't afford to lose track of what mattered. He needed to find Xavier. He needed to reach him before it was too late. It was late one night when he received a call from a familiar voice. "Elon," the voice said, filled with urgency. It was Dr. Chandler again. "I found something. Something we missed. There's a way to trace the energy Xavier is emitting. We can track him." Elon felt a glimmer of hope. "How? Where is he?" "I don't know yet," Dr. Chandler admitted. "But we can use the tracking system we've been working on. It's not perfect, but it's the best chance we have." "How soon can you implement it?" Elon asked, his mind already racing with possibilities. "I can have it ready within the hour," she replied. "But Elon, this won't be easy. The closer we get to him, the stronger the interference will be. If Xavier doesn't want us to find him, he could shut us down before we even get close." Elon's heart sank. He knew she was right. Xavier had the power to control everything now. And if he didn't want to be found, there was little they could do to change that. "I don't care," Elon said, his voice filled with determination. We're going to find him." The journey to track Xavier began with more questions than answers. They used every tool at their disposal: satellite images, electromagnetic readings, even quantum tracking algorithms, but everything was blocked by the intensity of Xavier's power. It was like searching for a needle in a haystack, and the haystack was made of pure energy. Finally, after hours of searching, they pinpointed a location, a remote area far from any major city. It wasn't a place anyone would think to look. It was a forested region, far off the beaten path. But the readings were unmistakable. Elon stared at the screen, a sinking feeling growing in his chest. "This is it," he said, turning to Tallulah and Dr. Chandler. "He's here." Tallulah looked at him, a mixture of fear and determination in her eyes. "What now?" Elon's grip tightened on the steering wheel as he started the engine. "Now, we find him. And we bring him home." But deep down, he feared that the Xavier they were about to find might no longer be the son he remembered. And even if he was, could they still bring him back from the edge of this unimaginable power? Or was it already too late? The answer, Elon feared, might be something far darker than they had ever imagined. The forest was dense, dark, and suffocating, an endless expanse of trees and shadows that stretched out in every direction. The faint glow of the moon barely penetrated the thick canopy above, casting everything beneath it in an eerie, almost unnatural darkness. Elon, Tallulah, and Dr. Chandler had arrived at the location after hours of trekking through the forest, guided only by the faint electromagnetic traces left by Xavier's power. Elon's heart hammered in his chest as they moved deeper into the woods. Each step felt heavier than the last, as though the very ground was resisting their progress. The air was thick with tension, and the further they went, the more Elon felt the presence of someone, watching them. It was as if Xavier himself were aware of their approach, and perhaps he was. "Keep moving," Elon muttered, his voice steady despite the rising unease within him. "We're close." Tallulah was walking beside him, her face pale and drawn, but her determination was clear. She had always been strong, but this was different. This wasn't about finding Xavier. It was about saving him, and that weight, that responsibility, was crushing. "We'll get him back," Tallulah said quietly, her voice filled with a kind of certainty that made Elon wish he could believe it. But the truth was, he didn't know. He didn't know if Xavier could be saved. He didn't know if Xavier even wanted to be saved. Dr. Chandler, leading the group with the tracking device in hand, was more focused on the data than the emotions swirling around them. She glanced back, her eyes shadowed with worry. "The signal is getting stronger," she said, her voice taut with stress. "We're almost there." They reached a clearing, and in the center of it stood a structure, an old, crumbling temple, overgrown with vines and moss. The stone walls were etched with symbols that seemed to glow faintly, casting a soft, ominous light in the otherwise pitch-black forest. "This is it," Dr. Chandler whispered, her voice trembling. Elon felt a chill run down his spine as he took in the sight. This was no ordinary structure. The energy surrounding it was unlike anything he had ever felt before, ancient, raw, and filled with an overwhelming power. It was as though the building itself was alive, pulsing with the very essence of Xavier's transformation. "Xavier?" Tallulah called, her voice shaking as she stepped forward, but the only sound that answered was the eerie rustling of leaves in the wind. Elon could feel it now, the sense that they were being watched. That Xavier knew they were here. He could feel the energy in the air growing stronger, coiling like a living thing, wrapping around them, pushing against them. The farther they stepped into the clearing, the more the air seemed to hum with static. "He's here," Elon said quietly, his eyes scanning the dark corners of the clearing. "I can feel it." And then, without warning, the ground trembled beneath them. A sudden gust of wind swept through the clearing, bending the trees and sending a chill through their bones. The air shimmered, and for a brief moment, the world seemed to distort, the edges of reality bending as though they were stepping into another dimension entirely. From the shadows of the temple emerged Xavier. But he was not the boy they had known. He was something else entirely. Xavier stood in the doorway, his figure cloaked in a strange, glowing aura. His eyes were no longer the warm, familiar brown of his childhood, they were now pools of light, swirling with an unnatural intensity. His face was emotionless, devoid of the warmth and love that had once defined him. "Xavier," Tallulah whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. "Please, come back. This isn't you. We can help you." Xavier's gaze fixed on her, and for a moment, Elon thought he saw a flicker of recognition in his son's eyes. But it was fleeting, like a distant memory that was slowly slipping away. "You can't help me," Xavier said, his voice deep and resonant, as if it were coming from everywhere at once. "I'm beyond help. I am everything." The words struck Elon like a physical blow, the weight of them sinking deep into his chest. His son wasn't just powerful anymore. He wasn't just a boy who could heal people. Xavier had become something more, something that defied the laws of nature, something that couldn't be controlled or reasoned with. Elon stepped forward, his voice cracking with emotion. "Xavier, listen to me. This power, it's not who you are. It's destroying you. You don't have to do this." For the first time, Xavier seemed to hesitate. His eyes flickered, his expression faltering as though he were caught between two worlds, between the son he had once been and the force that had overtaken him. The stillness stretched between them like a taut wire, but then Xavier spoke again, his voice colder, harder. "I'm not the boy you knew. I've transcended that. This world is broken, and I have the power to fix it. I can save everyone, but it requires sacrifice. It requires change." Elon's heart sank as the words settled into the air like poison. "You don't need to save anyone, Xavier. We can fix this together. You don't have to be alone in this." But Xavier's gaze hardened, and the energy around him pulsed with increasing intensity. "I am alone. And I chose this. I'm beyond your reach now, Father. I am what this world needs. The way forward is through me." The ground beneath their feet shook violently, and Elon stumbled, reaching out to steady himself. Tallulah gasped, her hands shaking as she held onto him, her face stricken with horror. "No," she whispered, her voice full of pain. "No, this isn't how it's supposed to be. You're still my son. You can come back. We won't give up on you, Xavier." But Xavier didn't respond. Instead, he raised his hands, and the energy around them surged, growing brighter and more intense with each passing second. The very air seemed to vibrate with power, and Elon felt a pressure in his chest as if the force itself was pressing against him, threatening to crush him. "We're running out of time," Dr. Chandler said urgently. "He's about to unleash something we can't stop. We have to do something now, or it will be too late." Elon's mind raced as he looked at his son, at the boy who had once been so full of life and promise. He couldn't lose him. Not like this. But was Xavier even still there? Could he be saved, or had he truly become something beyond their understanding? "We'll have to make a choice," Elon said grimly. "We can't stop him by force. But maybe, just maybe, we can reach him through the last thing that hasn't been consumed by this power, his heart." Tallulah's eyes met his, filled with silent understanding. They both knew what had to be done. The question was whether they could do it in time. Elon reached out to Xavier, his voice breaking through the noise and the energy swirling around them. "Xavier, listen to me. You were never meant to carry this burden alone. Please, come back to us. We'll help you. We are your family. You don't have to face this by yourself." For the briefest moment, Xavier's eyes flickered with something human. But then, it was gone, replaced by a cold, distant resolve. "I am what the world needs," Xavier said, his voice full of finality. "And nothing will stop me." The ground trembled once more. Elon's heart sank as he realized that the world they had known was quickly slipping away, and with it, their last hope of saving Xavier. But deep down, a small voice whispered, "It's not over yet." And somehow, Elon clung to that fragile thread, hoping that his son could still hear him. That somewhere inside, Xavier was still listening. The world seemed to hold its breath as the energy around Xavier flared to life once again. Elon stood frozen in the clearing, his eyes locked on his son, his former son, whose body pulsed with power, radiating an otherworldly glow. The sound of the forest, the whisper of the wind, the rustling of the leaves, it all felt far away now. The moment they were in had taken on a strange, surreal quality, like time itself was bending around the presence of Xavier and the unimaginable force he wielded. Tallulah's grip tightened on Elon's arm, her body trembling with fear and uncertainty. "We're running out of time," she said quietly. "If we don't do something soon, we may never reach him." Elon looked at her, his heart heavy with the weight of her words. The conflict tearing through his mind was unbearable. How had it come to this? How had his son, the child he had loved and fought for, become something so beyond reach? The answers felt so distant, slipping through his fingers like sand. Dr. Chandler, too, was tense, her face grim. "His power is destabilizing. We can't stay here much longer. If we don't act soon, the entire area will be uninhabitable. He's on the verge of creating something catastrophic." For the briefest of moments, Elon thought back to the beginnings of this entire ordeal. The device Xavier had used, the miraculous healing powers he'd once had, the hope that they could all fix things together, everything had spiraled so fast. The choice had been made before they even realized it. Xavier had chosen this path, and now it felt as though he was beyond redemption. But in the silence of the moment, Elon heard that small voice again. The one whispering in the back of his mind. It's not over yet. There had to be a way. There had to be some thread left that could pull Xavier back. He had to believe that. He couldn't give up on him, not now. Not when there was even a sliver of hope. "Elon," Tallulah whispered, her voice full of quiet desperation. "Please, we have to do something. We can't just watch him destroy everything we've worked for. He's still our son." Elon's eyes locked with Tallulah's, and for a moment, everything else faded into the background. The immense power surrounding them, the potential destruction, even the overwhelming force that Xavier had become, they all felt like they didn't matter. What mattered was Xavier's humanity. What mattered was that deep down, somewhere, he was still their child. The boy who had once laughed in the backyard. The son who had fallen asleep with his head on Tallulah's lap. The boy who had felt safe and loved. "We can reach him," Elon whispered, more to himself than to anyone else. "We have to. He's not gone yet." The wind picked up once again, swirling around them in an angry crescendo. The energy in the air became almost unbearable. It was like standing on the edge of a great chasm, the ground beneath their feet threatening to give way at any moment. Elon stepped forward, his breath catching in his throat as he tried to steady his thoughts. His heart pounded in his chest. He could feel the weight of the moment, the weight of everything riding on what he was about to do. He turned to face Xavier, his voice full of raw emotion. "Xavier, please. I know you can hear me. This power, it doesn't define who you are. You're more than this. You're my son, and I love you. Don't let this consume you. You don't have to be alone in this. You don't have to be this." Xavier's gaze flickered, the light in his eyes shifting ever so slightly. For a brief moment, there was something in his expression, something that resembled the boy Elon had known. A hint of hesitation. A spark of recognition. Elon's heart leapt, but before he could speak again, Xavier raised his hands, and the energy around them intensified once more. The ground cracked beneath their feet, a deep, resonating hum vibrating through the very air. "I don't need your love," Xavier said, his voice cold and powerful. "I am beyond that now. The world does not need you. It needs me." "No." Tallulah cried out, stepping forward, her arms outstretched as if she could physically reach her son. "You don't understand. You're hurting yourself, hurting us. This isn't who you are. This power, it's twisting you. You're becoming something you're not. But Xavier's gaze remained locked on them, unwavering. His form seemed to shimmer, becoming less solid, like an apparition, as if the energy consuming him was transforming him into something otherworldly. I am becoming everything, Xavier said softly, as though the words were a solemn declaration. I will reshape the world. The energy around him surged, and for a moment, it felt like the very fabric of reality was stretching, warping, bending, unraveling. Elon felt a wave of dizziness wash over him, his mind struggling to comprehend what was happening. Xavier was tapping into something far beyond his comprehension now. Something that seemed to affect not only the physical world but the very nature of time and space. But in that moment, something inside Elon clicked. The power Xavier was wielding was overwhelming, yes, but it was also deeply tied to his emotions. To the part of him that had always been vulnerable. To the son who had once been driven by a need for love, acceptance, and a place in the world. Elon's eyes softened as he stepped forward, his voice quiet but resolute. Xavier. I know you're scared. I know you feel alone. But you're not. We're right here. We always have been. Xavier's figure flickered, a brief moment of doubt crossing his face, but it was gone as quickly as it had appeared. The energy around him pulsed violently, as if trying to push them away. Elon stumbled, fighting against the force. Xavier, he called again, this time with more urgency, more pleading. You're still my son. You're not a god. You don't need to change the world to make it right. We'll fix it together. Just come back to us. And then, for the first time, Xavier's expression wavered. The light in his eyes dimmed slightly. His posture softened, just a little. It was enough. Tallulah rushed forward, her voice breaking. Please, don't do this. You can come back. You don't have to lose yourself. We love you so much. Xavier's form flickered one final time, and then, as if in slow motion, he lowered his hands. The energy around him began to dissipate, slowly but surely, until the air grew still, the ground stopped trembling, and the glowing aura faded. For a long, endless moment, there was silence. Xavier stood before them, no longer glowing, no longer a figure of unimaginable power. He was just their son, exhausted, broken, and vulnerable. Elon's heart raced as he stepped forward, arms outstretched. Xavier, my son, he whispered. Xavier's eyes filled with tears as he finally spoke, his voice a broken whisper. I'm sorry. I didn't know how to stop. Elon reached him, pulling him into an embrace, feeling the weight of everything they had been through pressing down on him. It's okay. We're here. We'll get through this. Together. In that moment, everything seemed to fall into place. The power, the destruction, the chaos, it all seemed like a distant memory, washed away by the love and the bond they shared. Xavier was back. And with him, the world had a chance to heal. But as Elon held his son close, he knew the real journey was just beginning. The road ahead would be long, filled with challenges and questions. But for the first time in a long while, he felt hope. Together, they would rebuild. Together, they would face the unknown. And together, they would move forward into a new future. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?